Starting out this windscreen video with a clip from last week that, at least on my computer, didn't come out. It's the spacer block for the steering, and I painted it black and then I repainted it white, and it's perfect. I can tilt the wheel all the way up and not crash into the upper part of the console. I can tilt it all the way down and it looks okay. So now we'll get into making a windscreen. Windshield time. This is 1/4 inch plexi. Right now I'm making a form to bend it on. This is a piece of a office table that I've drug home, and it's terrible to work with. It's just cardboard, but for this it's perfect because it's flat and I can put the big radius. This is the radius I have on the console, so I can put the matching radius here and try to bend it to that radius. And I've cut this 30 1/4. It's a 1/4 inch wider than the console, so I have 1/8 of an inch on each side to put a little rubber washer. So I'm going to route the edges here and probably call it a day. It's getting late. So I'm getting ready to bend this plexiglass, and I know the side panels are going to be tapered down, but I don't want to taper them until after I bend it, because I'm scared that if part of this is skinny and then part of this is fat, I won't get a uniform bend. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the paper off and I'm going to bend these down and get my 90s, and then decide what kind of curve I want on the side glasses. And again, how do I mount it? Do I mount it vertically, leaning in with the console, or leaning out to match the T-top? So a lot of unknowns, but I know I have to bend the side, so I'm going to go ahead and bend those first. So I think I'm ready for my first bend. I got the glass centered and clamped down to bend this edge. I have 2 heat guns. One is an old antique thing, but it puts out a tremendous amount of heat. It's a little scary actually. So I'm going to start out with the newer version, the more plastic version, and see if I can't get this hot enough to bend over 90 degrees. So the answer was no. The new heat gun does not put out enough heat to bend the plastic. The old heat gun with the wooden handle and the steel body still struggles to get enough heat to bend the plastic. I probably spent 10 minutes steady putting heat to this to get it to bend. It's, you know, I was scared I would like burn the plastic or scorch it or something, but you just got to keep putting heat on it, because it doesn't want to bend unless it's really, really hot. I don't know what degrees, but it's got to be pretty hot. So here I got the video at 4 times regular speed and started to bend gradually. But what it was doing, it wasn't following the edge of the board. It was bending a bigger radius. So it was going to be a problem. So I was putting another board against it and trying to shove it tight to the form board, and it helped, but it still is a bigger bend than the exact bend. So this came back to haunt me later a little bit. Not too bad. Wow, that took a lot of heat. I bet I had the gun on it for at least 10 minutes, and it didn't follow the form perfectly, which means I'm going to have a little bit of a wider crack on the side of my console, but that's okay. I do have a nice curve. It did give me a nice curve, so I'm going to flip it around and bend the other end. I guess I could cut the pattern a little shorter, but no, it's good. We're going to flip around, we're going to bend the other end. So I did trim a little bit off my form board so I could scoot the glass over that way a little bit so it wouldn't be too long. I don't want it sticking way over on the edge of the console. And also on my clamping board, I scooted it back a little bit, thinking if I got the heat a little further back, it would bend closer to the edge here. So I'm going to do another one. The last one took over 10 minutes. Hopefully this one will bend as well as that one. So I've got some options when it comes to mounting this plastic. I thought it would look kind of cool if it leaned back or leaned frontwards the same slope as the T-top. So it would have to lean way forward. But that would make a real compound bend down here. I'd have to bend the bottom that way and keep this together. Kind of scared me off. And the same with making it vertical. I would still have a compound bend down there, just wouldn't be as severe. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the same slope as the top part of the console and come on back to the top. So what I need to do is cut this horizontal, and then I'm going to have to cut a big old horseshoe around the T-top support. And it doesn't have to be a tight fit. It'd probably be better if it had a little crack around there. And then I'm going to have to take this and make it pretty curved. And then I would really like, if I can, to flare the top out a little bit, just so it won't do that. I would like to flare the top a little bit to keep it from flexing so much. But let's see, one step at a time. First thing I'm going to do is trim the bottom of it. So when I first cut the big sheet to size, I used a table saw, which worked great. But now that they have a bend on this, I was kind of hesitant to put it in the table saw for fear I might move it and crack it. So I used my little baby Makita skill saw. It's got teeny tiny little teeth, and it really made some pretty good cuts. So I want the glass to come down 1.25 inches so I can have a flange to bolt it to. As it comes straight down, it's going to go toward the front because this is sloped a little bit. So I'm making the notch around this thing. I'm going to make it like 1 3/8 inches or something. So I'm just using my little level to get me a mark. Okay, that's 0.5%, so that's pretty close. So if I connect the dots, should be able to make a template. So the further along I got on this project, the more anxious I became about cracking it. I've spent a pretty good bit of time on this thing so far. So to cut the curve, I used my jigsaw. I had the jigsaw speed set low. I had a blade with teeny little teeth, and I was very careful not to push on it. And I covered the glass with tape to keep from scratching it. And I got a good curve. And then with glass and plastics, if you're going to get a crack in it, it's going to start at an inside corner or a, some crease that's already there. So I was real careful to round out all my cuts to make sure they were smooth, put a bevel on the corners, and later on I put the torch on here to kind of further round out these edges, just to try to help keep a crack from starting. So the curves I was going to put on both of the end panels turned into straight lines. Just thought it was going to look better. So they're marked with a Sharpie. The line is marked with a Sharpie. And I'm cutting it over a piece of plywood, and the blade's actually going through the plastic into the plywood. Just kind of, it's so hard to hold this thing steady. I figured that was the best way. And once again, I got 2 more long cuts and no issues with chipping or anything else with this little Makita saw. And these teeny little teeth on this saw worked good. Now I wanted a little flare along the top of the windscreen to kind of just stiffen it up. So with the windscreen flat down on the board, the flare would have been bent down toward the floor. So I got it all clamped and everything, and I put heat on it, and I put heat on it, and I put heat on it, and the whole thing started warping, and then a little bit of it bent and got kind of snake-like at the top, and I just punted it. I think I was going to screw it up if I kept on going. So this is would have been a longer bend than the side bends, and then it has the corners to deal with that, they don't want to bend. So I tried and I failed, but it didn't hurt anything. So it didn't happen. I just couldn't get enough heat on it. So I bought these little rubber grommets to attach the plastic windscreen to the console, and they take a pretty big hole, 7/16. So I got a little nervous. I said I need to try this out on a piece of scrap, and sure enough, it shattered. So I can't use that bit. So then I tried with the brad point bit. It's just got a little point. and I drilled halfway from each side, and that worked okay. And then I tried drilling a pilot hole all the way through so I could match the two sides up a little easier, and that worked pretty good. So I'm gonna go along and drill a little bitty hole all the way through, and then I'm gonna come back with the brad point bit from both sides, and it's gonna be kind of scary because I certainly don't want to break my glass. Okay, 2 down, a bunch to go. So the drill bit left some rough corners. It's kind of hard to get in there with sandpaper, but the little propane torch does great. It melts the sharp corners and it kind of just rolls over, and it's really hard to see the difference, but you can certainly feel the difference with your finger. So I figured the smoother these holes were, the less chance of radiating a crack from them in the future. Okay, we are all grommeted up and nothing bad happened. So we'll bring it out and drill and tap. I'm gonna put 1/4x20 bolts to bolt it to the console with probably lock nuts on the backside. So I lifted it up a little bit. I don't want it touching the T-top at all. I want it free to vibrate. And I drilled a number 7 hole. This is the size hole you need to tap a 1/4x20 thread in steel. So I'm using a 1/4x20 screw that is self-tapping, self-threading. Obviously it's easier to thread plastic than steel, so it did fine. And I use that to thread them all. And then I'm putting in my little 1/4x20 button head screw, and it worked super. And it's long enough to go through, so once I get the tension that I want on the screw, I can go on the inside and put a locking nut, and it should stay tight but not too tight. That's my goal. It needs to be snug, but I don't want it vibrating loose, or I don't want to have to crank down on it too tight where it cracks. And after the fact, I went back and put some washers on under the heads of these things because they were distorting the rubber. Okay, windshield complete. Came out pretty good for the first time I ever messed with this stuff. And I got 8 fasteners, stainless steel with the rubber grommets. I got to get on the inside and put a lock nut so they won't, I can only tighten them up so much, so I'll have to get somebody to hold the outside. And I'll get it on the inside and put a lock nut and tighten it up against the fiberglass so the bolts should stay snug but not too tight and not come loose. So hopefully this windshield will last a while. It took a little while to make.